Now, let me give you a tiny introduction to myself. You saw that ACLU lawyer. I grew up in the entertainment industry. These are my parents. My father was a star, and my mother was a star. And my father won the box office award in '36, did about 80 movies, Crime and Punishment. A lot of them were not Westerns. And then he was a star on Broadway. And I grew up doing things that you would kick me out of here for doing. And my mother died when I was young, so I pursued love in all the wrong places. And I became very liberal. In fact, I thought the ACLU was a conservative organization. I joined. Mike probably knows this organization. It was the National Lawyers Guild. I was one of the attorneys. You know the National Lawyers Guild? That was a communist organization. So I would have been that guy up there. And somebody asked me, my drug supplier, Peter Fonda, asked me to help him start a film company, and we did, and it bought MGM eventually. And some wonderful woman, see, one person can make a difference, said she was going to be my mother because my mother had passed away early. And she would nag me and take me to seminars, and I hated them, and I'd walk out early, and I was living with a lot of people. And she gave me a Bible. She said, read the Bible and tell me what's wrong with it. And I read the Bible, and God told me that I needed Him. So this is a terrific movie. We need to support these movies. And tomorrow night, I'm going to show you Young Messiah. I worked on Young Messiah. I took out the monophysite problem. Why do I say I took out the monophysite problem? Because none of you know what that is, so you can't challenge me on what I did. So it's just academic speak because I was head of a department at Berkeley. The first person, academics, and all of you are academics, but you're good academics. You're actually trying to reach the students. When I was at Berkeley, most of my professors, I was head of a department, were trying to ignore the students. So that's why you talk in obfuscation about ontological nominalism, epistemological realism, and how it applies today to what we're doing in here. When I got the job, they asked two of us, where is Christ moving today? One of them was Ken Wales, who did Christie, and he started talking about specific examples, and I started talking about the epistemology of God's grace in chaotic situations, and suddenly they thought, this guy knows theology. Actually, I was just using big words. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Gerald Molen. Jerry Molen has been a friend of mine for many years. He was the head, and I guess he was partners with Steven Spielberg, but I always thought he was the head of the company because when I walked into Amblin, he had the big office, and we had wonderful talks. He produced some of my favorite movies. Rain Man is a great movie. Jurassic Park is a great movie. And Schindler's List is beyond great. So I'm going to give Jerry about as long as he wants to talk, and if he wants to cut it a little short, we'll give him some question and answer.
Well, thank you, Ted, very much.
By the way.
Thank you very much. First of all, Ted, thank you very much. And yes, we have been friends for a long, long time. I think mainly because we both have the same type of goals, and that's number one, to see that our dear Lord is involved in what we do and what we say and all of our actions. This conference, to me, is it's exciting. Exciting for me to be here and be a part of it, even at my young age. There's a joke in there. I'm not going to explain it to you.
I laughed.
But I'm excited to be here, and I know that I can see a lot of excitement on the people around here, so we must have a common bond, that common bond being family. Our family motto at our family reunions is probably the same as a lot of you, and that is simply that families are forever. Sadly, there are a lot of people in the industry that I've been associated with for so many years that don't feel that way. They have different views of family or no need of family. And for me, this is something that we can't allow to happen. It could be a real strange-looking world out there without the family. Very quickly, I just want to give an idea of where I come from as being family. I've been married to the same wonderful woman. Oh boy, here we go. For 61 years. Isn't that fantastic? She still affects me that way. 61, heading for 81, whatever. We have 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. Sorry, great-great-grandchildren. They are our family, and everything that we do and all of our actions are basically directed at them because we truly hope that our example will allow them to live the same lives that we've lived. I started out in this motion picture business about 58 years ago, driving a truck. The reason I tell you the story is because in America, you see that is still possible. Whether people think it or not, whether people talk about it or not, it is still possible. It depends on the individual. My reasoning for basically bringing this up is I want people to understand that it is a work ethic. It is a matter of faith and a matter of trust in oneself to try to be the very best that one can be. I started at the very bottom. In fact, when you measure it in the motion picture business, it's a little below bottom. And was lucky enough to attain one of the top ladders in the business, and that's the role of producer. I'd like to open this up, if I can, for any questions. Yes, sir, in the back. You want to come up here to this microphone, please?
No, they're just getting seats. But Jerry, I'm going to ask you a question. When you were working with Stephen on Schindler's List, what did it mean to him? Because it seems like his life changed at Schindler's List.
Well, when the project or the property was first purchased by Sid Sheinberg, I think that was about 10 years prior to the actual release of the film. It was during that 10 years that Sid Sheinberg kept after Stephen about, make this movie, take this property, make it into a film. And Stephen didn't react to it. It took that 10 years for him to one day say, to me, we were on a set prepping our next film, which was Jurassic Park. And he turned to me and he said, by the way, I want to do Schindler's List next. I turned to him and said, okay. A few minutes went by and he came over to me again and he said, I don't think you understood what I meant. I said, you told me you wanted to do Schindler's List next. He said, yeah. He said, immediately upon completion of Jurassic Park, I want to begin filming. Well, in Hollywood, for the most part, once you finish the filming, you yell wrap. There's a whole series of things that happen. There's the editing, the music, sound effects, a lot of things that happen. And that can take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, depending on the property itself. So here we are in February of 1992. And I said, let me think about this. I'll get back to you. Went home, thought about it, realized that the only way it might work is if we hired one other producer so we could continue on with Jurassic Park. So I started interviewing people, and I found this gentleman who was actually a survivor himself. Introduced him to Stephen, and the rest is history. So in 1993, that particular year was quite a year because we went ahead and prepped Jurassic Park. We prepped Schindler's List. We filmed Jurassic Park, immediately took off for Poland, and began the filming March 1, 1993. Finished in the end of May. June 11th, Jurassic Park was released, and the first part of December, Schindler's List was released. Quite a banner year for a young guy named Steven Spielberg. There is no way that this action of 2 films being done in the same year could have been done if he was not, let's just say, faithful to himself, having a bit of trust, faith, confidence in himself. the rest is history. The success of Jurassic Park, the success of Schindler's List. One was monetary. The other basically allowed us to see the Holocaust being taught in schools again, history being taught in schools again. Now, over the last 20 years since that has happened, I've personally noticed, like I'm sure a lot of you have, where a lot of our schools are changing. They are trying to eliminate history or revise history, change history to something that suits their agenda. And again, it's again like the families. It's something that we can't allow to happen. Another reason why we have this conference going.
Anybody have any questions? Because I got a lot of questions.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
CL.
Yes, Mr. Molen, it is an honor to be here with you. I'm C.L. Bryant with C.L. Bryant Show, and the evolution of film, Hollywood, from the time that you began driving the truck until this time has been apparent. Films with a moral message, a Christian message, at one time perhaps was not received. When did this evolution take place? At what point did you recognize that there was surely, or has Hollywood recognized that there was surely an opportunity for producing Christian films, and that America has always been primed for those types of films? When did you recognize that evolution coming?
Well, thank you, sir. That's a great question. When did I first realize it? I would say back probably in the 1960s, late 60s, in the 70s, where I started seeing that scripts were being basically, shall I say, just being pushed more and more forward in the way of story content. When I'm talking about things that were in story that require them to keep worrying about the film reviews that they did on the ratings and that they had on films. Because when I first started in the business, all the studios, for the most part, were run by people who owned them. They were filmmakers, not so much the business makers, but the filmmakers. The filmmakers understood stories. They all had families of their own. So they, in a way, they kind of self-censored and watched out what they were looking for. But there was a time where the young business entrepreneur, the young accountants, people getting in the business, especially in the legal side, where they started pushing the envelope. We started to see films like Midnight Cowboy, films that there was a lot of discussion about, the hard X rating, if you remember, on that film. It was just something that we were all noticing, thinking that, well, it's going to last for a short period of time, but people still care about what they see in the movies. Where I first noticed it, to answer your question, was probably in 2007. Strange. I could have said the 70s, the 80s, but that's not true. I did see that there was a change in the scripts, as I said. But the real hard change came in 2007 with the running and the consequent election of Barack Obama. At that particular time, that's when my relationships with the people that I knew in Hollywood changed. I wasn't looking for anything different. I still wanted to have an open dialogue. I still want to be able to talk about the issues. But all of a sudden, there was a freezing. It was like a moment for all of us to take special heed to, because people didn't really want to discuss what was going on. If I disagreed with anything that was going on political, then I was a bigot or a racist. I found that offensive, because there's not a religious, a racial, a bigot thought in my body. But this was the accusation that I was up against, and so were a lot of my colleagues. So that was in 2007, and that's when I think that there was a major change in the progressive movement, because it got really, really strong in the country. Our schools really started pushing for change in whether they taught history, how they taught history, what could they revise in history. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, there was a symposium basically that took place over adding a new thought in history. And that was to make the history of the United States start in 1875. Now, that's an interesting date when you think about it, because it would have eliminated the Founding Fathers, the Civil War. But they didn't win. But sadly, they were trying.
Amazing.
Just recently, back in Vermont or one of the eastern states, there was another issue about changing history. And that also lost. But once again, they pressed it. And they're going to keep pressing it. If you've watched some of these talk shows, people at night are interviewing young people on the street, asking questions, historical questions. Can't answer a one. That's quite frightening. What it's doing to the families, single families, and there's nothing wrong with a single family, it's just the idea there's a lot more of them. When I came into this business in 1957, the divorce rate was 22%. Today, it's well over 50%. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but that's it. Thank you, sir.
And
I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna move us on to David, so we have time at the end for more. David, do you want to give a little intro and take some questions, and then I'll move it on to Michael? Or do you two want to talk together as a team?
Whatever you like.
I want to do what's good for you. I'm promoting you.
All right. Well, hello. Are you guys doing good? Say yeah.
I didn't give him a proper introduction. This is the David White.
David A.R. White.
David White had a major impact for changing MovieGuide, because part of our patrimony was the John Templeton Foundation, and they said we couldn't give the Epiphany Prize, which is funded by the John Templeton Foundation, to anybody who wasn't in so many theaters and anybody who wasn't on so many television stations, and you couldn't do it to somebody who was on a Christian television station. And David and Michael started coming up with movies like What If that actually did well at the box office, were compelling, and reached beyond the Christian market, and we started giving them awards. So you ruined my whole plan for the Epiphany Prize. So there you go. David White.
Thank you. First of all, you're amazing. I have like 9,000 questions I want to ask you.
Well, wait until
I don't
the
know.
end.
I feel this,
wait until the end. We're gonna.
I will. I'll wait till the end. But this is Rain Man, for crying out loud. And I think I had just one question about the Obama 2016. When did that come out?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. And was that around that 2007? That was the change of that?
No.
Did that help?
That was just before the 2012 election.
Right. Okay. Anyway, well, we have a company called Pureflix. Thank you. Yeah. 2005. I had been. I'm from a small town in Kansas, outside of Dodge City. Anybody here from Kansas?
Ha!
Wow. Tough crowd. I grew up as a Mennonite. Any Mennonites here?
No.
Wow. Okay. Just so you guys know, the Mennonites make the Mormons look like a pack of Hell's Angels. Okay. I grew up conservative. I saw one movie in the theater the first 18 years of my life. Yet somehow, in the middle of a wheat field, when I was in high school, I had this, there was nothing but wheat in front of me and back of me, to the left of me, to the right of me, just endless oceans of wheat. And I felt like God had put this dream inside of me to go into the entertainment industry. And of course, my parents thought that was crazy, because my dad actually said, he goes, well, you can't be an actor because you don't know how to sing or dance, which is true. But I actually moved to Los Angeles in 1990 and to pursue acting, and got on a bunch of TV shows and did that for a while. But then the Lord, I felt, pulling my heart into the Christian film industry. And he started it by putting me in as an actor in these films. And so I did these films for these organizations like Focus on the Family or Youth for Christ or Concerned Women for America. And along that way, we started realizing it was like this underground of Christian films. And so they were like these 30 to 50 minute kind of Sunday school movies. And I remember complaining to the Lord, going, Lord, I want to go back to being on a TV series because these are, the production values are really bad, the writing's bad, the lighting's bad, and the acting is bad, except for my part. But and I felt like God saying, no, don't do that. I've given you these gifts and these, He's given all of us that Romans 12, right? We all have different gifts and desires that God puts into our hearts. And He says, use that for my kingdom. So for me, He was like, well, do something about it. And so we started producing Christian movies. I produced my first one in 1999, and then we were producing them, and it was always an uphill battle to release these films with studios because of some of the things that you had talked about. They weren't necessarily interested in our movies. And around 2005, my wife had said, I don't know why you don't work with Michael Scott, because she loved Michael Scott and forced me into working with Michael Scott. I met Michael Scott because we dated the same girl, but that's a whole other story.
That's the story we want to hear.
And anyway, so in 2005, we started a company with a good buddy of ours, Russell Wolf, called Pureflix, and with this goal and this desire to make these films that uplift and inspire the human spirit, but on a consistent basis. And so there were really no Christian studios at the time, and kind of like you said, it was run by us and our families, and we had obviously a strong sense of what family is, and wanted to serve the Lord in what we did. And so we've released now it's been 10 years. We released almost 100 movies. And they were going primarily to DVD at the beginning, just because of that was the model. And a couple of years back, we really felt like it was time to take that next step to the theatrical level. And somebody presented us with actually our investor came up to us and said, hey, I got these guys. It's a little band that nobody's ever heard of called the Newsboys, and they have a song called God's Not Dead. And would you guys like to put, could you make a movie out of that? And we had been wanting to make an apologetics movie for a while. Obviously, who here has read an apologetics book? Who here has read the entire thing? Right? It's hard to get through an apologetics. Ted has, of course.
I read everything.
But it's hard to get through an apologetics book. And so the question was, how do you make a movie, right? You have a great title and you have a good song, but how do you make a movie that's compelling and that will hold an audience and ultimately, hopefully, draw them closer to a closer relationship with Jesus Christ? And so we set out to do that, and we had this little movie, and it was funny because even when we were marketing it, we really felt like this thing needed to go wide theatrically. And some of the folks that were working with us had their concerns, or they were like, I don't know if this is, I don't know, it costs a lot of money to take a movie theatrically, and we're solely run by our own personal investors, right? And so we raised this enormous amount of money that we had never raised before, $5 million, and it was an interesting. That was an interesting time because God took us all the way up. It's funny how the Lord always takes you to the edge, right? I believe that we're supposed to follow our dreams, and we have an idea that our dream is from God if it's bigger than us. And so for us, taking a movie wide theatrically for the first time, independently, was bigger than us. And yet the Lord provided that money all the way up, literally right before the release. And we had practically, mortgaged our company on it. We bet everything on it. And an opening weekend, it came out on 750 screens, and it did 9.2 million. But what was amazing was that all these people called up that weekend, and they were like, "Who is Pureflix, and what is God's Not Dead?" And all of a sudden, it spread in Hollywood, and it was amazing because all the papers, everybody covered it. It went on to break all these records. It stayed in theaters for 20 weeks. It was the #1 independent movie of the year last year. It was, thank you. It was. I find this amazing. It became the 5th most profitable movie in cinema history, based on the percentages, which is unbelievable, right? And so you have this hunger in our country for the Lord, for God, for a deeper purpose. And what do we do about that is the question. Do we use our gifts and our talents to go forth? And when we don't know the next step that we're going to take, do we take that step? And I thank God that we did. It changed our whole company, of course. And we're excited to roll out number 2 and hope you guys all go.
David, do you want to take a couple questions, or you want Michael to say a few words first? Okay. Let me say something why I think this is so important and what my intention for this panel is. That Plato once said that a civilization that forgets how to tell its story dies. When you look around America today, a civilization that forgets how to tell its story dies. Okay. You know, the other side has gotten very good at telling their story. I don't want to take David's time, but I want you to be empowered that we have to tell the stories. That's what I see with God's. We've got to tell the stories. We've got to step up to the plate to tell the stories so our civilization doesn't die. If you're going to succeed in this business, and I was talking to Candace, who interviewed me for a local television station, you have to understand the business. You have to understand the craft. You know, Michael, I knew him when we went to Denny's and had lunch together. He's learned the business the hard way, and David's learned the business the hard way. But it is a business. Back in the 30s, you know, when they were asked by the IRS whether they wanted to be classified as an art, this isn't even my talk, or a business, they called it the entertainment industry. Why did they do that? Jerry can tell you, because they wanted the protection for the actors, for the unions, for the Teamsters. If they were going to be an art, then they could be like, you know, Van Gogh cutting his ear off and nobody would pay any attention. So it's a business. And the business is different in every one. When we look at, Jerry and I were talking about, when we look at the mass media, we get confused. When the mass media looks at Christians, they get confused. They wouldn't know the difference between a Mennonite and, and whoever else is out there. They just wouldn't know it. So they look at us all as pablum, you know, and there's a big difference because we have people on our board of reference from, you know, Catholic, Orthodox, Reform. They probably wouldn't even talk to each other except in a room like this. But in the entertainment industry and the mass media, you've got 3 major groups. You've got the press. The press makes money out of being negative nabobs. They do not make money. They want, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay? This isn't the talk yet. You've got another group, television. Television does not work by the vote of the audience. When I did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on CBS television, we got 37 million viewers. It was exciting. Kraft wanted to do it. The agency didn't want to do it, because the television agency becomes the gatekeeper between you and the product. In movies, if you can get in the theaters and you get the audience in the theaters, you can actually succeed. So movies are giving you a moment in time where you can make a difference. But it is a craft. You have to learn the craft. There's pictures of my parents. There's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And skip through this. The reason movies are a craft, and I see many people doing movies that are, you know, when you talk about ancestry, I teach how to succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul. I look at movies and sometimes I tear my hair out so I don't have any more hair because they make basic plot problems.
Not our movies, though.
Not your movies. No, their movies are perfect.
Not our movies.
But there was one movie last year called The Song. Oh, that wasn't one of yours, right? And the guy comes up to me at a conference like this and said, "Why didn't you give us a good review?" I said, "Because the first plot point occurred on page 54. Do you know that your plot point has to occur page 12 to page 17 because that gets the people engaged? You've got to have." He didn't know that you had to have the femme fatale come in on page 12, so you got worried about what was going to happen. That happens. You got the lawyer. He's coming in immediately. The threat is immediate. So there's a structure. If you're going to make, I'm telling you all this because I want some of you. We need more people of faith and values in the entertainment industry and less of Hollywood in the people of faith and values. We need to equip you to tell your stories. Why do children go from this beautiful girl, which is just an excuse to show one of my granddaughters, to this other girl who I don't know, and I would have years ago, but not anymore? Because they're fed 50 Shades of Grey. I could go on and on and on about how the movies can hurt people. Some kid at the University of Chicago bound his girlfriend and beat her because of 50 Shades of Grey instead of the 10 Commandments. And anybody who tries to make a distinction between education and entertainment. I was the head of a department at Berkeley. One of the professors there was a radical environmentalist. She was getting nowhere. She was teaching 8 people. She made a movie. It reached millions of people. Suddenly her agenda became the world's agenda. If a movie makes over $40 million like God's Not Dead, it's reaching a lot of people. At 37 million people, that would have been $370 million. So we look at movies, we look at all the criteria, and what we find, and this is just to encourage you, the criteria here, 150 criteria. Great movies are great stories well told, like God's Not Dead 2, and Young Messiah. You're going to see 2 great movies, have a positive worldview. Hollywood may not want a positive worldview. My kids at Berkeley didn't want a positive worldview. One of them gave me a very depressing script. I said, this sounds like a French movie. He said, that's what I want to do, a French movie. But I said, the French don't like French movies. They go to Captain America, and they're spiritually inspiring. I'm sorry, 83% of the people who go to movies go for humor. My wife, don't tell my son I said this because he'll tell my wife, has been on chemo for 20 years. We went to a movie that was well-structured, 90 Minutes in Heaven, and she walked out and she said, aren't there any happy Christian movies? When you've been on chemo for 20 years, you don't want to go into a movie that has a bad ending, that is negative, that's depressing, and they're spiritually uplifting. So of the top 10 movies, year after year, the top are Christian, biblical, redemptive, moral worldview. None are rated R, none anti-American. And Christians buy more tickets every year. Did you hear what I said? They buy more tickets. And movies, the strong Christian content, do better every year than the negative. In other words, the whole country is on your side. All you have to do is show up and show off and learn your craft. Now, I'm not going to go into all the reasons. The more educated you are, the more concerned, because the more intelligent, the more movies influence you. Children spend a lot of time in the movie industry. The movies and television programs are the teachers of our youth. If you're losing your kids, you're losing them to the media because we're not making the media. We should be that 60,000 hours. Boys are fed a large dose of violence. Not everybody wants to copy the violence. Only 7 to 11% of boys want to copy violence. 31% want to copy the sex, etc. We know what that is. There have been 500,000 studies or more, so Congress said the evidence is irrefutable. 90% of the kids are abandoning the faith of their parents. Does anybody care about this? Do you care about this? That's why you have to support this movie tonight, because this is going to get them, fired up, because they love to be the underdog. This is going to get you out there. You got to support these movies. I won't go into the Golden Age. The Golden Age, the church got involved in Hollywood, Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the Jewish Defense League. They cleaned up Hollywood. My father was a star at that time. You couldn't kiss the horse, let alone the girl, thank God. And then the church left Hollywood. The problems we're facing today is that the church left Hollywood. And you went from 100% G-rated films to 82% R-rated films within 3 years. Gerald Molen, mentioned Midnight Cowboy. You went from The Sound of Music to Midnight Cowboy. In Midnight Cowboy, the pastor tells the boy to get on his knees, but not to pray, to do something salacious. You went from The Greatest Story Ever Told to the first sex and Satanism film. America just lost its way. Jerry just told you that. The solution is you. That's why we're talking to you, and I'm going to rush through this. We have to make more movies with faith and values, and we have to teach our kids to be media wise. I'll tell you what, I may show you this and I may not. I'll show it. I want to skip through this so you can get some questions in. I'm moving very fast. It's not doing it. I'll show you the next one. Why didn't it do it? If I fix it, it won't do any good because I cut this whole talk earlier today. Okay. Redemptive, Jeremy, that's yours. I love you. That's the best you've ever done. Redemptive Christian content continues to increase year after year. Now think about that for a second. I want you to look at that. Is anybody excited about that there's more Christian content? There's more Christian content, and we have a lot of people coming to Christ at the gala. We have the guy who made Young Messiah last night, who grew up in Iran and did movies that were very hard R, and he came to Christ. And we had the guy who discovered the Beatles who came to Christ. But even when they don't, they want to make money. So we show them how to make money. Warner Brothers just let off 6,000 people. Do you think they want to let off 6,000 people? They need to make money. So they're making movies like this, Risen. You know, every day I get something from Sony about Risen. You got to promote Risen. You should have shown it here, not us. The 33, Young Messiah that you're going to see. God's Not Dead 2, Ben-Hur. There are so many faith-based evangelical films coming out next year that it'll be almost week after week after week, and only 5 movies are released a week. Does anybody care? You have a window in time. When God's Not Dead 2, if you show up and show off at the box office, you will change the entertainment industry. You've got to be there at every one of those movies. Go to MovieGuide.org, find out when they open, and show up. When St. Paul comes out, you know, with Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman just came out in one of our interviews, said he's a Christian. We knew he grew up, his father was a Christian. He's now declared, he's doing St. Paul. Give him a break. Go watch his movie. Sorry.
Because he needs it. He needs a break.
He does. And you do too. Civilization that forgets how to...
Who is Hugh Jackman? Have we even heard of Hugh Jackman before? Sorry.
Civilization that forgets how to tell its story dies. So learn how to tell your story. And I'm going to try to skip through this quickly. It's plot first, character second, dialogue third, idea, music, spectacle. We review and analyze a lot of scripts for the studios. Everything is plot-driven in movies. I had one Christian filmmaker his movie was so character-rich. And I said, but people don't go to movies. They go watch Seinfeld for the character, but they go to movie to find out that God's not dead. Finding Nemo is about what? Finding Nemo. It's a Wonderful Life. It's about what? Clarence showing George Bailey It's a Wonderful Life. God's not dead is what? That God is not dead. Simple premise that you're proving. It's just like a lawyer in a court.
Screenplay is mathematical. It is like music, and it is precise. It's not like a novel. It's not like free-form poetry. It happens in time. It starts and it ends. And you write it over a long period of time, but you experience it in a finite period of time.
It's mathematical. You can learn how to do this. You get a premise. Where are you going? I was going to Salt Lake City. How did you get here? I had to go through Phoenix and speak. Plot, characters, who goes there and whom do you meet, and themes or interactions between the characters. Everything has to flow from the premise. I get so many scripts where they don't understand even what a premise is. None of your movies. Excuse me. Lord, forgive me. I just sinned.
Hold on a second. I think we should write some of this down.
Four basic plots.
Do you have this?
Don't get too clever. There are only 4 basic plots. Man against man. My daughter is going up to the filming of Rocky. Believe it or not, there's another Rocky. What is Rocky? Man against man. What is Runaway Bride? Man against woman. Man against nature. Can you tell me a man against nature movie? Rich, Man against nature? Martian. Perfect. Man against himself. Anybody? Castaway or Hamlet. Man against the supernatural. almost every horror movie that's made. The movie is about the guy failing. I have people give me scripts where their family is succeeding the whole time. You know, Billy Graham Association said, we want to make a movie about Billy Graham. 3 years in a row. And I said, what is his shadow? He said, he doesn't have a shadow. And I said, you don't have a movie. Really? I love Billy Graham. I'm not complaining about him. But a movie is about a guy who's a terrible person like Iron Man becoming a savior of the world. It's got to go through this transition. Schindler starts out being a Nazi. He's got to go through this tremendous transition. If I could have only given the gold in my teeth. And you weep because this man is the change that I went through. Screenplay is like a shark. If it's not moving forward, I'm not going to do all this. No amount of great animation will save a bad story. Everything is emotional. You're writing for emotion. You're not writing. You know what? We get stuck. Jesus told parables. Do you know that he only had one lecture? Everything else was a parable. A parable speaks to the heart. Make movies. Make a difference. Be humble.
I've found over many years of experience in working with writers that the biggest mark of an amateur is the inability to take criticism. Now, it's certainly understandable why somebody would not want to hear that criticism. They have put their heart and soul into that script. And in many ways, what is in that script is laying themselves bare for the public. And this is a scary thing. And so if somebody doesn't like your script, they don't like you. But that is not the way to become a great writer. You have to be able to listen to criticism.
Script structure. We have a program, so you just plug in your script and you can get the structure. You have to understand the business. This was when I was teaching at Berkeley. Gone in 60 Seconds made $198 million. Buena Vista took all of its sales and rentals and then gave 20% royalty to Disney. Jerry, you don't know anything about the royalty system, right? And Disney took the royalty and subtracted all of their distribution costs, and then they got credited earnings, and then Nicolas Cage got 10% of the credited earnings. Now, what's the problem with this shell game that's going on? Who was Buena Vista? Disney. If Disney pays $50 million to ABC to promote their movie Frozen, who gets the money? Disney. If you pay $50 million to ABC, who gets the money? Disney. Without the royalty system, we go broke. You have to understand the industry and how to write contracts. I'm a lawyer. I'm telling you, you got to know what you're doing. The top salaries, these people are not poor. And I think people should be allowed to make as much money as they can with their wit and their wisdom. But the royalty system is something that has defeated a lot of people. There's a book out called Fatal Subtraction, Art Buchwald. He was supposed to get 10% of a movie. By the time Coming to America made $400 million, he didn't get a dime. We do MovieGuide to help you choose the good and the true. And none of these are working. No. It's decided it's not going to work. Okay, love is patient, love is kind, love is not boastful. Whatever you write and produce determines what Hollywood makes for the next generation. And this is good that we're losing these clips because I want you to get questions. Does all of you know the story of Telemachus? Jerry, do you know the story of Telemachus? It was Ronald Reagan's favorite story. It was Teddy Roosevelt's favorite. Do you like Teddy Roosevelt? Maybe. Reagan? Maybe. Okay, I introduced Ronald Reagan twice, and he knew my father, so I liked him. But Telemachus was a minister beyond the Alps. Rome had had the gladiatorial games for years, all over the Roman Empire. When Pontius Pilate, according to Josephus, came into Israel, they killed 62,000 people in the gladiatorial games just to show off, just to entertain people, just for entertainment. He comes to Rome, he sits at the top gallery, and he sees the killing and the pillaging and the plundering. He says, "Stop in the name of Jesus." and they don't stop. You know the story. And he jumps into the arena with the wall so high that the lions and the tigers and the bears like me couldn't jump out and get the people. And he says, "Stop in the name of Christ." And the people start to stone him to death. So a gladiator runs him through. Teddy Roosevelt wrote a book about this, The Man in the Arena. And as he was dying, he looked at the emperor and he said, "Stop in the name of Christ." 404 AD, the gladiatorial games all over Rome, from Spain to the Indus, all over North Africa, stopped because one person jumped into the arena. These men have jumped into the arena. We've got to support them. I want you to jump into the arena.